Good evening, fellow Toastmasters, guests, friends. This is my first speech, so welcome you all. The icebreaker I never had. Well, let's see what the icebreaker was. I grew up with my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, my maternal aunts, my maternal uncles ever since I was a kid. Since both of my parents were working professionals and they thought it would be in the best interest of everyone that I grew up with my grandparents. As a kid, when I was growing up, I was an introvert. I didn't speak much. I was very content. I just accepted whatever people gave me. And then I didn't create a fight or I didn't create a ruckus. I was very silent, except for just one thing. My parents used to visit me over the weekends or whenever their busy schedule permitted them to do so. And I always wanted to be with my mother ever since I started to think on my own. And whenever they visited me, I made sure I voiced my displeasure by creating a huge ruckus. But somehow, my mother would convince me by diverting my attention to something else, and then another week would pass by me staying at my grandparents' home. For all this yearning I had for my mother, I was very scared of my father. I used to run and then hide in my home somewhere whenever my father used to visit me alone. I never understood why it was. And my grandmother had to convince me that it was my father and he was here to visit me. For some reason, we just never got along. I couldn't relate to it. As years passed by, I started settling into my grandmother's home. The weekend visits of my parents were of less drama, but still I was creating a ruckus. And then I started settling down. Soon afterwards, I joined a school which was just a mile away from my home, a place where I've spent like 14 years of my childhood, a place where I've had like fond memories for my lifetime. I was in my second grade. It was July 9th, 1992. We had just finished a lunch. The afternoon classes were going on. I was concentrating on my teacher, and then I saw my maternal uncle stand outside the class. It was pretty surprising for the fact that he had never visited me in school until that point in time. And more surprising was the fact that he had visited me when the classes were going on. So I was pretty curious. So my teacher saw me, my maternal uncle standing outside the class. And she went out and then she had a word with him. They had some serious conversation. And then my teacher came back to me and then she told that I had to pack my bags and then accompany my uncle. I was thrilled that I was going to leave school midway while all my other classmates were busy attending school. At the same time, I was curious. So I packed my bags, I walked out of the school class, and then my uncle caught my tiny little hand, and then we started walking towards the parking lot where his bike was parked. When I say bike, it was a motorbike. As I got onto the motorbike, I asked him, where are we going? And then he told me that we're going home. So my intuitive thinking told me, okay, maybe some relative had visited home, and maybe they wanted to visit me. So I thought, okay, we're going home. So we started a journey to home. In a few minutes, we reached a traffic signal. Usually from that traffic signal, I take a right turn to reach my home. But on that particular day, my uncle went straight ahead instead of taking the right. So I asked my uncle, where are we going? And he told me that we are visiting your mom in her home. I was thrilled. But again, I told him, it's a work day, so mom is supposed to be at office, so why are we going now? He said, no, mom is at home, we are going to visit her. After a while, he stopped his motorbike at a shop, and he got me a big scoop of ice cream. A big scoop. It was again surprising because he never got me an ice cream without me asking for it. And at that moment, I didn't understand why he got it, but now when I look back at the incident, I realized that he just wanted to shut my mouth. He didn't want me to ask any more questions. So he gave me ice cream. See, I got the ice cream and then I got onto the bike and then we started the journey. So I was enjoying the ice cream and then I was enjoying the motor ride. I mean, I used to love the motor rides with the uncle. In a while, we reached my mom's home. We got down from the bike and me and my uncle entered the house. There was a huge gathering of people there. Some of the faces I didn't recognize. Most of the faces were familiar, but I still didn't know them personally. I walk ahead, and I see my grandmother standing there, and my grandmother is crying. I didn't know why she was crying. And then my mother was sitting on the floor, her knees were pressed against her chest, and her head was buried between her knees. So I dropped my bags, I took my ice cream scoop. It was a big scoop, mind you. It was still half full. So I was eating my ice cream. I went and sat next to my mom. I tried to lift her head, but then she resisted. So I started eating my ice cream again. I was looking around. The faces were all dark and gloomy. I finished my ice cream and I put the scoop down. And at this time, I forcibly lifted my mom's head. And I see she's crying too. Her face was full of tears. And I've never seen her cry until that particular day. I walk up to my uncle and I ask him, why is mom crying? And he tells me that my father was dead. And I ask him, what does it mean? He says that my father had reached God and he would never come back. For a guy who was just 6 years old, that was too much for me. I didn't understand what was going on. For the next few hours, I just went and sat in the corner. I saw people, throngs of people coming and going out, crying, hugging my mother, hugging my grandmother. Some of them coming towards me, lifting me, consoling me. But then I never understood anything. At that point in time, my only worry was my stomach was empty and I was feeling very hungry. And we went up to my uncle and asked him to get me something to eat. And we went out and we had food. I was pretty happy. So next day, the final ritual rites were being performed for my father. And then we went to the cemetery. And since I was really afraid of my father, my uncle was carrying me. We were standing right at the back because I was very afraid. And then once the religious rites were performed, someone near the body shouted, does anyone want to look at the face for one last time? And my uncle asked me, do you want to see his face for one last time? I said yes. And then we quickly moved forward, removing all the people who were gathered front, and looked at the face for one last time. And that's it. That was the last time I saw my father's face. In a few minutes, he was up in flames. I came back to school after 2 weeks as if nothing had happened, because I was too young to understand the gravity of the situation. Maybe because I didn't understand my father much. I didn't relate to him, I didn't understand him. Even before I had a chance to speak to him, understand him, break the ice with him, he just left the world. And that happens to be the icebreaker I never had. Thanks for listening.